So I've realized that with the change of the season, most years, my music habits also change based on how warm or cold it is outside. Cold weather, I definitely go for like moodier music, and summer's like upbeat country, a lot of country in the summertime. Have you all noticed this about yourselves? Do you change your music based on the temperature outside?
I do. I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have so many playlists. You wouldn't believe it. And I have ones for rainy days. I have ones for if the weather has a little bit of a chill in it. And then there's specific albums. I'm a big albums girl. I used to be a big playlist girl, but now I'm just like big albums. So there's specific artists where I'm like, okay, I'll listen to like this Taylor Swift album when it's cold out, but then I'll listen to this Lorde album only when it's sunny out. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. I think there's studies about this
seasonal.
too.
It's seasonal. Well, and you have a friend that recently just released some brand new music.
I do. Her name is Madison Hughes. She is a conservative, but she doesn't need to go around like stating that. But she has gotten a lot of notice, and she and I filmed together for our conservation video series, separate of my work with Independent Women's Forum. And it's called All That I Am. It was just released on April 11th. It's really fantastic. It's a mix of Americana, country, indie. She's been on The Voice. She competed for...
Wait, really?
For 2 episodes. So she made it to like the second round, I guess. And Billboard has recognized her music. She was just in Cowgirl magazine, which is a big Western. We were talking about Western stuff. She was in Western magazine. Like, her voice is so soulful. I'm biased because I'm a good friend and collaborator with her, but people in the industry have noticed it, and she's still an independent artist yet to be signed, but she will. And she's toured with Brent Cobb. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's like country Americana. And listeners to the Problematic Women show should check out her music. Like, this album is about like love and finding your way, but a lot of the stuff can also apply to like nature. We're talking on Earth Day. She has a song called Wild and Free, but it also can apply to like going outdoors and seeking out wanderlust, doing all that type of stuff. And so it could play to any kind of mood. I feel like her album could speak to, you know, cold, chilly days, warm, sunny days, and all that. So yes, check out All That I Am by Madison Hughes.
Okay, I'm going to listen to her song Wild and Free. That's like one of my, I feel like life slogans. I have a pillow at my house that says Wild and Free.
Love it. That's great.
I like to embrace that mood in my life.
We'll have to go and have a Problematic Women tour edition if she ever goes and tours around here soon.
Yeah, no, she wants to come back and tour here. So anyone who has a venue in the DC area, you should book her.
I love it.
She's going to be in very high demand very soon.
Very, very soon. Well, Gabriella, thank you for joining us once again.
Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Problematic Women, getting you back for some fun news today. Later on, Bear Cubs will be featured, which I am very excited for.
Yes.
But you serve at the Independent Women's Forum as director of their Center for Energy and Conservation. You are our in-house, out-of-house, in-house, out-of-house, in-house in the conservative movement, but out of the building, expert on all things conservation and energy policy. So we're excited to break down some of the recent happenings here in this week as we celebrate Earth Day.
Earth Week, Earth Month.
Yeah, all
the whole
things.
kit and caboodle, yes.
All the things. I love it. But before we get into some of that, there's a really interesting shift that is happening in our world that I want to take a second to talk about. So we all live here on the Problematic Women podcast in the world of conservative media, politics, policy in Washington, D.C. We all kind of live and breathe the news and what is happening in the news. And for so long, the White House has taken a very traditional, almost like buttoned up approach to how they share the news. And the White House press briefing room has been big, traditional media outlets, and some smaller outlets have gotten in. But those smaller outlets wouldn't necessarily get questions. They were kind of in the back, on the sidelines. And all of a sudden, we have a White House that has given a platform to small media outlets, which is really, really fascinating. And it's a shift that's in line with what we've been seeing for years as far as trends of how Americans actually consume their media. So I want to start by taking a minute for us to share how do we get our news? Like this weekend, the major news obviously was the Pope passing away. When you all heard that news had broken early Monday morning, where did you go to learn more about that? What was your news source?
I usually check Twitter first because Twitter is a very good news aggregate. It has been for now X. I always keep forgetting to call it X. To me, it's Twitter, X, what have you. But I looked there. I was looking at a account called Visegrad24, and it's from Eastern Europe. And they actually do a pretty good roundup of trending news across the world. They touch upon American media. They're a Polish, South African, I guess the guy who leads it, like he's Polish by way of South Africa. I forget exactly what it is.
It's a wild background.
He's based in Eastern Europe or South Africa. I think maybe Eastern Europe, in Poland. And he aggregates it. I saw it. I looked there before I checked my email, and I was like, what are they talking about? Replacement of popes. And I looked to see, I was like, oh, wow, Pope Francis died. So I feel like I'm a millennial. I get my news through what is now, it's still a new medium, of course, but X, Twitter is kind of like a legacy social media outlet. It's not, new and fresh like some of the other emerging social media outlets or shows or entertainment avenues that we have now, because it's been around for almost, I would say, 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's coming up on 20 years, maybe 18 years. I've used the platform for going on, I think, 15 years. So yeah, that's where I look to see. And then, my email, I guess, too. But Twitter, because I'm just curious to see like what's trending there, because things are more rapid fire. Mm-hmm. And I feel like for a lot of us, that's the case. I don't use TikTok, so I don't go there. Instagram is kind of harder to do news. Everyone is more, into aesthetics. But I still think Facebook used to be that way. I hope it goes back to being that, where you could find out your news. But I feel like Twitter in rapid time is just the best outlet if you want to see something quick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For me, I go to Twitter first, and that's where I will see what the news is, what's happening. And then based off of what piques my interest, what I think is important, what's blowing up, then I'll either go to an account of a news site, whether that be like, I don't know, Daily Signal, Daily Wire, National Catholic Register, depending on what it is, I'll look up that account, or I'll just go straight to their website. And then that's what I do. And then maybe after that, I will go listen to a podcast of an influencer to break it down, like see what approach they take. So that's kind of my regiment when it comes to the news.
I do a lot of X. And often I will look at the news headlines because I think it's helpful. But especially, and you probably both experience this, but when you have certain areas, subject matters that you're really interested in, you kind of start to know like, oh, if there's news on this topic, this person on X will be weighing in and they'll have the latest. So you actually start to go to very specific accounts, or you just like go to the department secretaries and like, what is Christy Nome saying about this?
To be honest, I'll go to my Twitter DMs with my family because they'll send me the stuff that they think is important first. And I'm like, okay, I'm caught up.
I love it. I love it. Well, so there's all these smaller media outlets that aren't so small anymore, but that have really kind of broken onto the scene and have been on the scene for a while, but have gotten elevated in the last 3 months since Trump took office. And so Politico, I think we have a picture we can put on the screen of this article that they just published titled MAGA outlets disturbing the White House briefing room. Meet the 8 MAGA outlets disturbing the White House briefing room. And so we can see this on screen for those that are listening audio only. There's about 10 reporters in this photo, and some of them you will recognize because 3 in that photo have actually been on problematic women. In the red, kind of in the back, Elizabeth Mitchell, the Daily Signal's White House correspondent, and then Mary Margaret Olahan in the center in the green jacket, the Daily Wire's White House correspondent, and then Natalie Winters in the blue dress and blonde hair works for War Room and is their White House correspondent. So what Politico did is they took those 3 ladies and 5 other individuals, White House correspondents, that are conservative media, and they kind of broke down, hey, there's this new situation that's happened in the White House briefing room, also taking note of the fact that Trump has barred the Associated Press from that briefing room because they refused to call the Gulf of America, they refused to call the Gulf of America and remained to call it the Gulf of Mexico. So it's just like this shakeup, and traditional mainstream media is, quite frankly, been really shook by it because it's this massive sea change from what they're used to. And traditionally, when you had reporters kind of on the sidelines, those reporters were not getting called on. It was the people in the seats. And how the White House press briefing room works is you have an assigned seat and it has your name on it. That's your outlet seat. And you sit there and you kind of have to work. You have to have some credibility in order to get one of those seats. Your outlet does. And so for all these new media outlets, they don't have seats yet. They're kind of on the side, but they're getting called on. And they're getting just as much, if not more attention from those in the seats. And traditional media's response has been interesting to see their response to this.
It is, because they feel like their golden calf, which has been untouchable. If you've worked in conservative politics or just in politics in general, as long as I have, about a decade and a half, you remember across the Obama years, the first Trump administration, Biden, how that was just their golden calf, untouchable. Only certain publications could be there, ask the questions, would be, called upon. And the shakeup could prove pretty good. I think it largely has done pretty well, as long as, the correspondents are actually, and I would say like Mary Margaret Olohan is excellent. Your guys' correspondence, fantastic. I would also even wager to add Reagan Reese from Daily Caller.
Yes.
Katie
She
Pavlich.
should have been mentioned in this article.
Matt Foldy. Yeah. I mean, Katie Pavlich is a longtime fixture. I've known her for a long time. She's awesome. So like even those are new media people that are like the designated new media chair, but they may have been there for a while. Matt Foldy from the Washington Reporter. He used to be at Free Beacon and all these other outlets.
Just had his debut in the White House new media chair.
He did. Everyone was very fascinated by his cowboy boots. Yep. And that's great. No, he's a very interesting guy and a very cool guy. Like he gets a lot of interesting scoops. So if you don't already read his publication, you should. But for a long time coming, new media has started to become embraced, because that's kind of where maybe the Trump administration is very tactful in their approach in terms of trying to get ahead of where new media trends are. They see that more people are consuming their media diet through different diversified outlets. There's still, of course, a value to some legacy media. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read Bloomberg. I read outlets. Even if I don't agree with them all the time, I think it's still valuable to know, like, do they have a tip or do they have a breaking news story?
Yep.
And as part of a healthy media diet, you should be reading different viewpoints or even kind of middle of the road center viewpoints. And then, of course, center-right media, too. I think it all could be balanced equally. But not so much, it's not the Wall Street Journal that's a problem. It's not those outlets. There are these outlets like AP that purport to be unbiased and fair and, honest in their reporting, but they've just lost the trust of the public. And this has been a trend. And even a lot of now newly branched independent, formerly, these people are probably more center-left in their orientation. I could probably think of like Chris Cillizza, who's the other guy, Matty Iglesias, excuse me, and a couple others who write on Substack. They're independent. So they used to be part of this, legacy media ecosystem. They've branched off. So a lot of people on the left are even realizing, I can't make a dent in legacy media. I have to branch off on my own. They may not agree with the White House, but I think they'll say and may have conceded that this might be a really fascinating approach, where if you get a Democrat administration, who is to say that they wouldn't do this, elevate some of their kind of like-minded influencer media type folks or independent journalists using Substack or some sort of other news outlet there. And one person who I think would be interesting, she used to write for Politico. What is her name? She wrote Tara Palmieri. Okay. Palmieri. So she's kind of like pretty objective, I would say, for the most part. And she says that, like, my parents are conservative, or one of my parents is, one of my parents isn't. And she's interviewed people from all over the spectrum onto her show. And she, like, has an exclusive deal with YouTube. I bet you she would probably apply for this, too, if she hasn't already. Someone kind of, like, coming from that legacy media landscape to go there. So I think it could be fruitful. And it's good to see a lot of recognizable faces and names, people I've, walked in the same path with, because I am a freelance journalist when I'm not policy making. And it is really hard to stand out as a freelance journalist, getting exclusive, clips and interviews and then printing it out there for the world and people to consume, your audience to consume. It's a lot of work. It's not easy to get. And when you can see your hard work pay off, I don't think I have aspirations to go to the White House. It's probably too competitive. I don't have time to do that. But that's like the pinnacle of any journalist, whether they're freelance or legacy media, to get a question in the White House. That's a huge honor. That's something to check mark, in terms of accomplishment of being, a journalist. And there are other ways to measure success as a journalist. You can get some awards. You can break a story that has a positive change, or even a negative change on some policy, or to expose a bad policy, rather. So it's a good thing to see this diversification of news coverage. And everyone, even if you don't like some of the outlets that are featured, you can say, I might agree with them. Great that they're there. I don't agree with their questions. I want to, be selective or still, look to other sources. And that's what it is. You can make an assumption for yourself, like, do you trust this person's credibility? Like you do with legacy media reporters too. So people can pick and choose. They may not like the tactic, but I think it could be a net positive. And like I said, if the administration flag were to shift, back to a Democrat or someone independent or something of that nature, they're going to definitely employ this tactic too. This is
Oh, yeah.
not the end of it. Mhm.
Oh, totally. Well, and I think not only is it a good thing, but it's almost like a bare minimum, like keeping up with where the public is. I mean, Trump did this during his campaign of choosing, okay, I'm not going to go on some of these big traditional outlets that have plummeting ratings. Instead, I'm going to go on podcasts that are getting 1 million, 2 million listens with every show. I'm going to go to the people where they are. So it feels like Washington, D.C., that's always like a little bit behind and bureaucratic and like slow to change our ways, because we love tradition in Washington D.C. and that's a beautiful thing, but sometimes it's like, all right guys, get with the times.
Exactly.
And so like they had to do this.
I feel like it's no wonder that these legacy media outlets are falling behind, and these articles being written about the new MAGA media just exemplify that perfectly. It's like, why is Politico taking time to write a big article and dig deep on these 8 MAGA outlets, and New York Times doing an explainer video on it? I mean, to be honest, when I first heard about this, I thought this was a big nothing burger of a story. I was just like, this is embarrassing for the New York Times to devote entire article, entire video. Tim and I make videos, takes a really long time. They devoted a lot of their time to that instead of, trying to get their reporting up a little bit. And it really just speaks to the fact that these new media outlets were born out of the need for alternative voices, and they aren't realizing that they're just criticizing the old media. If they're going to call us the new media, they're the old media. And it just feels very embarrassing to watch. It kind of feels like, I mean, not that I was there, but like in the 80s when everyone criticized like Molly Ringwald and all those actors for the Brat Pack for being like young and disruptive and not really talented. But it's like, that's what the people want. And if people want the Brat Pack of MAGA media, then let them have it and let them have questions. They only take a quarter of the questions that come through the briefing room. So I really don't see why there's such a big fuss about this.
Well, it's representative. I think to your point, it's representative of where the American people are at. And I mean, it's just fascinating to watch the trends as far as like mainstream cable news. So, I mean, Fox is still crushing it. Fox News is kind of the big mecca of traditional media outlet that is still just firing on all cylinders. Their prime time still draws, at least as of Q1 2024. This was Adweek was reporting they were still getting about 3 million viewers in prime time. But then, I mean, CNN, only around 500,000. MSNBC, only around 1 million. And those are numbers that have just continued to fall and fall and fall. And then you have Pew Research, I believe it was Pew, reporting that 54% of Americans say that they're going and turning to social media at least some of the time to get their news, like we all said. Obviously, this is, I think I'm interested when you see the break. We maybe even have the graph from Pew that we can put up on the screen. But the breakdown, it's not like just young people that are turning to social media for news. It's like every generation to some level is using social media. And like, I think about like my own parents. My dad gets on YouTube all the time to look up topics. And that is a huge component. YouTube and Facebook still do play a big component for where folks are turning to get their news. So it's an interesting pivot that I am glad to see the White House picking up on.
Seriously. Working on the back end of social media for the Daily Signal has really informed my media habits.
And we have some exciting news on that front, Elise, that you should mention.
We hit 1 million followers on Facebook for the Daily Signal. And that's exactly what I had in mind when you started talking about it's not just Gen Z and millennials who are getting their news from social media, but every week I go to Meta Business Suite and I get to see the breakdown of the genders and, well, two genders, demographics, where people are, like where physically in the United States are getting their news from. And a majority of our audience is actually not technically young at all. And they're on like the 55 and older crowd. And yeah, we redirect them to our website sometimes, but it's really interesting. It's pretty all encompassing.
Yeah. Everybody's doing it now. It's cool. All right. Well, to come full circle, we started this conversation about where we got the news related to the Pope passing. So we need to touch on this because it is massive news. And even if you're not Catholic, these kind of decisions do still impact you. They impact our world. The Pope has a very, very prominent position. And Gabriella, we learned that we have something in common this week, that our moms are both Catholic.
Yeah.
But we are not. But
I probably lean
You lean.
that way. I come from a complicated religious background. It's Judeo-Christian. My dad's Jewish. My mom's Catholic. So I take the best of both worlds.
I love it. Were you confirmed in the Catholic Church?
No, I was not.
Okay.
But I've gone to Mass enough times where I know enough stuff. But I like it. There's a veneration for, I mean, my family's from Eastern Europe. Lithuania is a very heavily Catholic country. So it rubs off on you.
It does.
With that. And I've always been intrigued by the Pope. And I mean, some people are like, well, follow the Pope on political lines, but you can't necessarily do that. And even with Francis passing away, there were certain things I wasn't too privy on. I thought some of his encyclicals on climate change were a little misleading, kind of buying into the alarmist rhetoric. And then similarly, he had a disdain for private firearms, even though the Vatican is protected by Beretta. A lot of the Swiss guards are armed with Beretta rifles. It may have changed, but they use weapons personally to protect him. So, you could have some disagreements. He was somewhat of a consequential figure. I think the church is probably going to steer back into probably more Ratzenberg or JP2 direction, perhaps. And the names that are being floated are really interesting. I think before going on there, we talked about Cardinal Sarah, although he's a little older. I'm seeing there's Pizza Bola. Like, it sounds like Pizza Bowl. Yeah. And there's some others. There's a cardinal from Hungary and a couple other places in Eastern Europe. I think there's even like an American also being considered. And then I saw today, I hope it's not reduced to this, because there's kind of like a delicacy and like a process to the Pope succession, and now the betting markets are jumping in. I'm like, don't desecrate this. Like, can we leave certain things untouched from this? People are betting like who's going to be the next Pope. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't believe in that, personally speaking.
I saw that. Apparently it's illegal in the United States to bet on who the Pope is going to be.
Is it really?
It sounds so sacrilegious.
It definitely is.
It's blasphemous.
Well, Elise, you are Catholic.
I am Catholic.
And I wanted to ask you, because for probably about almost a year now, I've been hearing people talk about Cardinal Sarah, and from conservatives' perspective, they're like, for the next Pope, this would be amazing if this gentleman became the next Pope. Why? Why is he, at least among conservatives, like top of the list?
Well, I think in order to understand why a lot of conservatives, whether they're Catholic or not, really like him, I think we need to understand what's currently going on right now. So currently, because the Pope has passed and we don't have a new Pope yet, we're in a period called sede vacante, which is just the in-between period. And they are going to have the papal conclave. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie. I hope you haven't, because I heard it was very sacrilegious. But basically, it's just...
Duly noted. Don't watch.
But it's just the closest pop culture reference point that a lot of people have for what happens when a new Pope is being chosen. But basically, I have a few things written down. Yes. 135 cardinal electors reside sequestered to discuss the global needs of the church, and they'll cast their paper ballots. Donald Trump would love that.
Oh my gosh.
And
very secure.
If no cardinal receives 2/3 plus 1, the ballots are burned with wet straw, which makes the smoke signal black, apparently. But when a pope is elected, yes.
Oh, I never knew the smoke thing. Okay.
I knew, I didn't know how it was devised, but that's interesting.
So yeah, I had no idea either. And when they are elected, when the Pope is elected, the ballots are burned alone and there is white smoke.
That explains that.
And
yep.
Apparently you can get a special stamp during this period of sede vacante because, there's never really long stretches of times where there's no Pope. So yeah, it's a big thing. Everyone's watching it very closely. So who is Cardinal Robert Sarah? He is from Guinea, Africa. And Africa has actually seen a huge growth in Catholicism over the past few years, which I think makes him a strong contender in a lot of people's eyes. I think there is another cardinal from Africa or is African, not sure on that. But Cardinal Sarah is favored because I think the modern landscape of Catholicism favors traditionalism. So I think, it's not specifically like we love Cardinal Sarah, nobody else, but I think it really just reflects the bigger trend of people wanting traditionalism in their lives. National Catholic Register reported that certain dioceses in America found that there were over 53% growth in Catholic converts during Easter, a lot of the millennials. Wow. And I was talking about this with my sister, who's also a millennial, and she said she has a lot of friends who converted because they were like, I don't know if I just like couldn't get along with the priests at my church or the female pastors, or my one church had the pride flag out, and I was just looking for something a little bit more traditional. And I'm not saying that's all Protestant churches, but just for the people who were looking for a little bit something something a little different.
Throw us Protestants all under the bus.
definitely not where you go to church. It's just like the hunger for traditionalism is what people are looking for.
Absolutely.
And it's really important to note that as Catholics, we must pray that the Holy Spirit guides these cardinals to make the right to make the right choice.
Amen.
And it's not a specific person. It's just, what does the church need right now? And like, we don't know that. So the people betting, you don't know that either. And
so pray.
A lot of non-Catholics are probably betting who wouldn't even benefit from the new pope anyway. So
definitely. And I think, all this to say, Michael Knowles actually had a really great reaction and commentary on this over the past couple of days on Twitter. And he said in one specific tweet, he said, among the chief lessons of Pope Francis's pontificate is that the modern left-right political paradigm does not map neatly into pre-modern institutions, including and especially our civilization's most ancient and paradoxically ever new institution, the church, and the bride of Christ. So rest in peace. So basically, when people are betting, people are saying, oh, we want Cardinal Sarah, or, oh, no, we want Cardinal Pizza Bola, and just like thinking of it and he's going to advance conservatism, or it's going to make the Catholic Church more liberal.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Like the Catholic Church, nothing is changing. The Pope is not the president of the Catholic Church.
He's not God.
Is here to explain church dogma. He's here to show how it functions in the modern world. He's not trying to bend it to the modern world's will. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. But that is basically the traditionalism aspect, is why people are like, I would like Cardinal Sarah.
Okay. They believe
hopefully someone younger, because all these popes have been on the 70, 80 cusp. So hopefully it will be someone younger who fits kind of in the traditional viewpoint of the church and will keep that. But it definitely won't be another Jesuit. I keep hearing reports that it probably will counteract the Jesuit perspective. Maybe someone more like a JP who walks that way. So we don't know. It's anyone's guess like who's going to be the next pope. But I feel like it will be hopefully someone slightly younger.
Yeah.
But still like aligned with the church's teachings and can appeal to, let's say, those younger people who are hungry for religion or some sort of belief system.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's very interesting. I feel like, everyone has these opinions, can write all these think pieces on what Pope Francis did a disservice to or did a favor to America for. And it's like, first off, he's not looking at American politics through an American lens, because that's not his business, quite frankly. And I did see a statistic floating out there that under Pope Francis, there were just like an incredible amount of conversions from young people who wanted something traditional. So even, if you don't agree with what he said on certain American political issues or his opinions, like there was that boom in traditional people coming back to Catholicism because it's traditional. So I think that's pretty beautiful. And
the Lord can still work, even with a pope that's maybe not in full alignment with our policy position.
He hasn't read the Project 2025 handbook.
Wonder if he was sent one. Well, Gabriella, you mentioned you weren't necessarily a fan of Pope Francis's opinions on climate change. This week, we are celebrating... I don't know if we could say I'm celebrating. I'm like, I feel like I've been unaware of Earth Day my entire life. But this week, I'm feeling more aware of it because of you. So it's Earth Day this week, Earth Week. I don't know what we want to call it.
Earth Month.
Earth Month. Getting more in touch with the Earth. What is Earth Day? Why do we have a day to celebrate the Earth to begin with?
I believe it stems back from the Nixon era, because as a Republican president, oddly enough, he was behind the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and similar outlets like that. Over the years, sadly, the EPA has been weaponized. It's been politicized. I'm very intrigued by what Administrator Zeldin is doing. I think steering it back to its original intent to promote clean air, water, and lands. And that's where we have to be. And the whole Trump administration has talked about we can have energy development alongside true conservation practices. But the origins of Earth Day, as Katie Pavlich pointed out today, which is Earth Day, and I've acknowledged this and I've reported on this as well. One of the founders, his name is Ira Einhorn, and he was this radical. He was against the Vietnam War. He was very steeped into this very kind of climate alarmist, what is now climate alarmist, very reactionary view of environmentalism, that everything is being despoiled by man or woman. We have to peel back our overzealous consumption. We're destroying everything, da da da. So he has an interesting story. When you research, okay, so he's one of the founders. He organized some of the early rallies, one of the main ones. And people come to learn that he is not so peachy keen. He actually was responsible for murdering and composting his girlfriend.
Wait,
ex-girlfriend at the time. Mm-hmm. You look at NBC News, do a Google search, type in his name, Earth Day founder kills girlfriend.
Oh
and
my God.
In his true reactionary form, he did, I would not say it's a good environmental practice to compost people. Do not do that. That's wrong. And there's a whole movement about composting people when you die. There's a whole trend to bury people through composting. It's kind of weird.
A biodegradable cemetery.
Yeah, the left is really pushing this as a way to reduce your carbon emissions in the afterlife. But I digress there. So he did this very bizarre thing. Of course, murder is unacceptable. Never acceptable to do that. But composted her in true radical environmentalist fashion. So people don't know this about this kind of dark side to Earth Day. I think the holiday had originally good intent. And I'm often of the viewpoint that I think the holiday or acknowledgement can be made more conservationist, not this preservationist, rewilding, hate humans, put nature above people type of vision that this holiday has long espoused and long advocated for. And people, whether they're radical environmentalists or far leftists, sometimes there's a lot of overlap between the two, sometimes there's not. They've made this holiday pretty extreme. So I think conservatives could add their own spin. What I've been doing this week at our Center for Energy and Conservation is putting out materials, articles, explainers, videos to explain what a true conservationist Earth Day would look like, that people are not despoilers of the environment, that you can go hunting and fishing, which are the two, and buying guns actually. Those three activities contribute the most to conservation funding. A lot of these legacy environmental groups, green groups, talk a great talk about saving the environment, helping to bolster species. You can't find that in the type of monies that are there. It's $30 billion from hunters and anglers and gun owners since 1937. I have never seen concretely that same amount of money fielded from green groups to help bolster species do this. It's largely to help recoup lawyers' fees, to sue the government when it's Republican administrations. So they talk a great game about we're saving the environment, we're doing this. You see them obstructing true conservation practices. They're working to stop hunting and fishing and expansion of public lands. They're also supporting environment or clean energy projects, so to speak, solar and wind. We've talked about this before, that gobble up so many acres of land.
Yep.
And they call that green. And then wildlife is also being imperiled by it too. And instead of, if you were truly for clean energy and you want the least footprint available for your output, a nuclear reactor would be your best solution. I mean, I still like the conventional stuff too, but we hear this talk of clean energy. They balk at any mention of nuclear reactors, which only uses 1 square mile of land. And solar consumes about 75 times that. And then wind is about 360 times that. There's a great graphic I posted on social media from Visual Capitalist. It really contextualized. So you can't say you're for green for intermittent sources that only work 25 and 35% of the time for solar and wind respectively, and then ignore the downstream effects of those projects. So they can't say they have the upper hand on this conversation. They don't. And the proof is in the pudding in terms of the energy output. It's not reliable. The land use, which is grotesque. If we're being, as a conservationist, it makes me sick to see that they're saying this, utility scale solar and wind projects are going to save the planet. They still use fossil fuels. They still are backed up by oil and gas, and they have to use concrete to build all those structures. You have to use rare earth elements for those panels. So much goes into it. You're not really trading off much. You're just taking more steps to claim you're green, but you're still using the oft vilified fossil fuels you hate or minerals you don't want sourced here, but you're importing it from China and other countries that don't have the best practices like we do. So I think we can make, as conservatives, we can help lead the charge and work with amenable people on the center left. I think there's an appetite. There's people part of this abundance movement. Everyone cares about abundance. People like nuclear and the abundance movement too. Nuclear crosses across political divides. With AI looming overhead with us, everyone's talking about we need reliable power, including nuclear and even coal. Nuclear, coal, and natural gas.
Yeah.
Coal is even being brought back to the equation. And you'll even get some people to make a concession and say, okay, these work. We have this here. We don't want to shut these down. We're going to be needing them to power data centers. And even just as people become more prosperous, if the economy improves, as we're expecting under Trump policies, more prosperity is going to mean more people will be consuming energy, expending energy. There's going to be more transportation. People are going to fill up their gas tanks to go on vacation or work, what have you, to travel. There's going to be more energy used across, our lifetime and our daily lives, because so much of what we do and thrive and depend on comes from expending energy. And expending energy is not bad because we just naturally do it sometimes too. But so much of our life depends on it. Food, gas, processes, makeup, byproducts. So derivatives too. So much of life would be not so fun if we shift away from this. So I've been arguing in my columns and different verticals this week that you can have American-made energy. And American-made energy, whether it's coal, natural gas, nuclear, geothermal, hydropower, using that, shoring up that, producing more of that here is ultimately better for the environment, better for the economy, and better for national security reasons because you know where it's coming from. Yeah. You're employing a good labor force. It's vetted. You're not using child or slave labor. You are not doing so much in emissions because you're not importing the byproducts, derivatives, materials when you're producing things here, not having to ship or transport as much, taking all those extra steps. And then, of course, the overall output is when more people are prosperous, working in energy, for instance, or any industry, but working in energy in particular, they're going to care about the environment more than they would if they were displaced from the workforce.
Yep. I've never heard it explained on such like a big picture government bureaucratic level, and I feel like my mind is just blown because from such a young age, I'm sure you guys remember this too, but especially on like Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, anything, our toys, there was such a push for personal responsibility when it came to conservation, where it was like, don't use plastic straws. Miley Cyrus and Nick Jonas sang a duet about like save the world, and like even episodes of like TV shows was like, oh, we did a recycling trip, and so much of the conservation conversation for our entire lives, we've been told it's a personal responsibility. They don't tell you that there are NGOs and government bureaucrats actively working against more conservative Republican policies that would actually help. And so I guess my question for you is, while they battle it out up on Capitol Hill in the government, what should what should a good conservative do to conserve the environment while not, giving into the left's talking points on these things?
Definitely do not borrow leftist talking points on this issue. I think so many people, even on the right, sometimes are hung up by this climate jargon.
Yeah.
Having to repeat, regurgitate, parrot that. I say you don't do that. The climate changes naturally. I don't think there's a debate over that. Does it mean it's catastrophic? Can humans reverse it? Absolutely. And we've lowered our emissions. We've done that. But saying that it's a catastrophic change impacted by humans is conceding to the left. So I say abandon that altogether. That doesn't mean you don't care about the climate component. It just means you're not really offering anything new. What's the distinction you're offering between the left and the right if we're making it a political issue? And that's where recapturing conservation, because the left has sullied that term to mean preservation or rewilding. If you try to return nature to pre-human settlement, not only is that very disquieting, it's a lower quality of life. It could mean elimination of people. We don't believe in that Malthusian stuff. If you concede to them, I think some center-right people who might follow the climate, they're not for Malthusian practices. I'm not saying that. But you give a little bit to that philosophy, you're going to be demanded to appeal to all of it. So to make a distinctive conservative conservationist philosophy, it's very easy. You could talk about American domestic energy. Move away from the all of the above jargon. Talk about reliable, abundant, secure energy, like Secretary Wright, Burgum, and EPA Administrator Zeldin have talked about. And Trump's administration has put out that posturing really well. It says, we're going to be encouraging this. We're not going to be picking winners and losers. And we want the market to ultimately decide this. We're not going to be picking the lever of who is the most preferred industry. We want the market to respond to this and dictate this, and we'll follow, because we've put out this posturing, which is refreshing. We did not have that the last 4 years. Biden was picking winners and losers. That's why all this billions, if not trillions soon in spending will be uncovered and exposed, because his whole putting climate first over conservation led to so much disorder in the different government agencies. We saw this climate prioritization in Department of Interior. So even the Department of Interior and its adjacent agencies were going woke, or promoting drag queens at national parks, or climate change above wildlife management or something of that nature. I followed this really closely, and it bothered me so much how much of that got sullied and dirtied. And then the EPA was all about, environmental justice, and environmental justice grants go towards like grifters. Chuck Grassley had investigated that an American Rescue Plan EJ grant, environmental justice grant, did not help impoverished communities. It was 94% going to overhead, salaries, bonuses, all this extraneous stuff. So all this stuff about like climate this, climate that, we have to spend all this kind of money. It did not help the people, the causes, or other targets that they were intending to help. And conservatives have had to play defense because we just haven't been able to articulate what that is. So I think a true conservationist thing, we believe in market innovation. We do think there is a place for government. Some conservatives may disagree with me. I think there is a value to public lands. I like national parks. I think Bureau of Land Management lands, which have been mismanaged, can go back to being managed properly so you can have commercial and recreational purposes and uses. Mm-hmm. And I think if we privatize everything, if we do affordable housing on public lands, not a very smart idea if I'm personally speaking to that. I just think you'll bring the urban problems that are not solved to rural areas where there's not this infrastructure where you can support affordable housing. Yeah. And freedom cities. I know the president has talked about that, but that's not going to work in a place like Salt Lake City. People are moving there to escape urbanization, escape kind of this, how would you say, like densely populated area. They want to break away. They want to go outdoors. They want to have room to breathe. And if you export those policies to rural areas, you're not really solving it. And there's a lot of private land available still. And I know that debate might be had in the right about, do you sell all the public lands? Will it help with the debt? It's not going to help with lowering the debt because most of the debt is accrued with entitlement spending. Mm-hmm. So creating a scapegoat instead of solving and fixing the problem, the elephant in the room, which is entitlement spending, it's 60% of our budget, what is largely eating up the debt and deficit. And you'll anger people, and we'll have a problem, in the future if we say sell all public lands. You will lose a lot of Western conservatives in Utah, Montana, Wyoming, because people depend on public lands to source their food, to recreate, and there's a value. The problem goes down to mismanagement, and that could be fixed. This administration is working to restore trust with stakeholders out west and say that, yes, we can maintain national parks. Yes, we can allow you to graze. Yes, you can go hunting. Yes, you can have an outfitter business. You can go bicycling. You could do ATVing, because Biden, believe it or not, actually even made it difficult for you to do ATVing, biking, hunting, fishing, even going recreationally shooting on public lands. So we have to have a balance restored there. But to go the other extreme, it's a minority position. Some are floating it. But I'm trying to caution conservatives to not do that, because you lose public lands, it will become like Europe, a feudal society where only the rich and privileged can have access to public lands. So there is a purpose. They can be managed better. Yeah. And those are our lands. It's the public's lands.
Yeah. The first time I went out to Utah and like the concept of public land out there, like everyone just kind of knows about it. It's like, oh yeah, you can just like camp wherever. And my mind was blown as someone who grew up on the East Coast where there's not a lot of public land.
It's more private here, yes.
A lot more private. It's like, what? Like you can just like pitch a tent. Like this is awesome.
I think you don't have to have permits for camping,
I think so.
But it's not a high fee or anything of that sort.
Low bar. Mm-hmm. But you recently had this awesome experience that we have to talk about because it's adorable.
Happy to. Yes.
So you, in your work as a conservationist yourself, you had the opportunity to hold a baby bear, which is something that very few people ever have the opportunity to do.
Correct. Yes.
It was adorable. How did this transpire that you got to hold this baby bear?
So this is actually because of certain laws in place. There is a law that I love to write about. It's one of the few good things the government does. Wildlife management, true conservation practices. So there's a law called the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is largely funded by excise taxes paid on firearms, ammunition, hunting licenses, and the like. And the bulk of that, this past year, there was like 1.3 billion collected to go back to the states. So it's apportioned based on number of licenses sold and the acreage of each state. So every state gets a different amount of money according to those metrics. So a place like Texas, I think, probably gets the most pool of money, and then it's divvied up according to, again, those two metrics. And this Bear Den study is part of this Partner with a Payer program under a agency or a department called the Office of Conservation Investment. It used to be called the Wildlife Sport Fish Restoration Fund. It's all housed under the Fish and Wildlife Service to make it simple. And so all those monies from guns, licenses, ammunition, and what have you goes to fund projects like the bear den study. And there have been about close to 100 bear den studies since they started doing this Partner with a Bear program. You always see the advertisements say, be a bear hugger for a day, or work for the wildlife agency to do this. And there are professionals who do this multiple times a year in the season when the cubs are 5 or 6 weeks old. They're really young. And people had come to me and approached me or messaged me and said, how could you do that? Does that, like, holding a bear cub, does it mean the mother's going to reject it? Is she going to not embrace it? It's like, no, they're still young enough where the biologist had reassured us that they're not going to pick up your scent and be rejected by the mother. I guess because of the age and just because they've already been so closely yoked to her and like feeding from her, all this, it would take some extraordinary circumstance for the mother to reject it because they're so young. She's tranquilized safely. They're examining her. So it's not just like the fun of holding the bear cub.
Yeah.
We're also seeing, and we did see that the mother got tranquilized. She was checked for vitals to check to be healthy. I think this was her 3rd or 4th litter. And these were triplet bears. So I held 2 of the 3 cubs. So they were adorable, of course. And that full circle of the hunters' contributions, gun owners paying into these excise taxes. Excise taxes are not a punitive tax for those asking. It's a tax that manufacturers pay, and it's about 11% for certain gun models, 10% for others. And those monies are part of that funding mechanism, the $30 billion I alluded to, since 1937. It's one of the most well-orchestrated government, I wouldn't say a government program, but funding sources, Department of Treasury, Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife Service, because those monies have to be stewarded very responsibly. If there's a deviation, if they're not going to habitat restoration, wildlife conservation efforts, hunters education courses, and target shooting ranges on public lands, you will potentially have your funding called into question. There's a thing out of Colorado. They passed a gun control law, and they're deputizing their Fish and Wildlife Service, their Parks and Wildlife Department, to possibly oversee gun control, which would be very much against their purpose as an agency. So if they're found to be in violation of that, they could have their funding withdrawn or questioned. So you have to use those monies responsibly, which is why a lot of people, when they learn about Pittman Robertson and they see the bear cubs and everything full circle, they support the program because they see that my money's going to something good. We support wildlife. We don't want to see black bears go extinct again. This was at the turn of the 20th century. We had a problem where there was no management protocol. There was no hunting seasons. There were no licenses. So people were just freewheeling, hunting everything to extirpation or elimination. And that's not good. Everything needs to be balanced. And so with this model in place, hunting season, and of course, nobody should be hunting bear cubs. I think that's obscene. That goes against anything ethical.
Yes.
So everyone's like, well, how could you be a hunter and support bear cubs? You can, because you believe that this is an innocent creature. You're not wanting to harm it. Maybe down the road you would hunt an adult bear, and that's perfectly fine. You're not going to harm an innocent little creature, and you shouldn't, because that's an ethics question. It's an ethical teaching in hunting that you don't target something with its mother. You have to look and carefully choose what you're going to be if you're hunting a bear or if you're hunting deer, you have to make sure it's according to the season you're hunting with, or the type of tool or the rifle or the bow that you're allowed to use. Like, can you get a male? Can you get a female? People who are more seasoned than me in hunting have been able to say, like, okay, this deer is like 5 years old. And I was like, how do you know? Because of the tines. Or you can tell even from an adult bear, which you can hunt in the shorter, highly regulated hunting season you have, you'll know if a bear is old, needs to be culled or managed. So all that goes into it. And just to see this and to be a part of this program and to see the continuation of that, it's not paradoxical, because you're not harvesting every bear in existence. You can't. It's impossible. They're really smart too. They'll outweigh you, from what my friends who hunt bears tell me. That and same with deer. There are so many deer in this DC metro area. They go hide in places. They go to federal lands. They go to military bases because they're very smart, and they know that if they stay in a certain area or private land or what have you, they're going to get hunted. So they become very smart and highly adaptable to the cities, and they become a little ravenous and they eat things, and deer actually carry ticks. So it's in your duty, if you're a hunter and you can, and it's lawful, you have to help manage the deer, because you don't want people to get Lyme's disease from them carrying that tick. So you can enjoy animals. I love seeing wildlife. Like, that's the part of being a conservationist. And in the time that I do get to target them or pursue them, it's such a small fraction of the entire population you're harvesting. And you don't want to over harvest. That's a horrible principle. And so hunting teaches you this. And this bear den study, I mean, it's it's an out of this world experience. It's like holding a baby and a puppy, and they're just so sweet and innocent. It didn't scratch me whatsoever, and it's just adorable. Like,
we should roll this so people can, you can see on screen. For those listening on audio only across podcast platforms, you can see the actual video on the Daily Citadel YouTube if you want to check it out. But absolutely adorable, this little bear cub that you're holding.
In a bear den study. Unbelievable, but it's due to the testament of hunters paying into Pittman Robertson that I get the privilege to participate in this bear den study. And as you can tell, these little guys and girls are super cute. Just soaking it in. This is surreal, but a testament to the North American model of wildlife conservation. Okay, so let's see.
Little paws.
And you would think by the claws it would scratch you. This little bear,
tame.
I think it was the female.
Do you know how many weeks?
5 or 6 at the time.
So little. So obviously they're checking out the mom, making sure mom is healthy.
The little cubs get examined too. They get ear tags. Okay. They have a chip installed in them, so they're highly monitored. Okay. So if someone is found to have illegally poached a cub, they can know if they find the carcass, and even like a young juvenile bear. So everything is really streamlined, closely monitored. So it's not just like, oh, they're harming the bear, putting these little tags in the chips. Yeah. No, it's all based in science. This is all funded by people contributing to this Pittman-Robertson Act. It's all this, 360 full circle of this system in place, this funding, the work of biologists who are tasked with doing this, and the support of these monies coming from excise taxes. So this is what perpetuates wildlife. Like, a lot of people scream, I'm defending the bears. What's a good, like PETA talks about defending wildlife. They do bupkis for wildlife, if we're being honest. All the Humane Society talks a great deal. We're saving the whales. We're saving eagles. Why are they licensing, or why are they giving or turning a blind eye, to wind projects or to tortoises? So all these groups that love to talk a great game about this, are they actually putting where their mouth is? Are they opposing projects which could pose a threat to wildlife, whether it's on land, on sea, in the air, what have you? So you have to be careful, for those listening, there are lots of hunting groups that do this. And I think there's even some non-hunting groups which are non-political that actually do care about like animal welfare, true animal welfare. And finding those it's like a dime in a dozen. But the hunting organizations do a great job too. So people are a little distraught when they see a hunting organization, you guys support killing this, but a lot more goes into it. And there was just a new group started to help pronghorn antelope, which are the fastest mammal on North America. They're beautiful. They have beautiful eyelashes. They have like a orange, tan, white pattern. You can find them in Wyoming, Colorado, a lot of the western states. Beautiful creature. I heard it's really fun to hunt. I haven't hunted one yet. But people are concerned about their numbers dwindling. So there has been a new group as of like the last few weeks starting out to help like boost their numbers. So it's the hunters, the most the people who pursue these species in a highly regulated, but not this overt, full-fledged assault fashion. When it's hunting season, because most of the time you're admiring these animals. You're not hunting them or shooting them with guns. You're admiring them. You're making sure you can harvest them. You want to see their numbers grow. You see their babies during the springtime. You see them in the winter. There have been horrible reports because of harsh winters out west where a lot of these populations just have dwindled. And that happens sometimes with very harsh seasons. And so it's in the hunters and even anglers' best interest, because anglers do a lot to help rehabilitate trout, whether it's sea trout in the ocean or wild trout, salmon in cold water streams. And so sportsmen and women, hunters, anglers, recreationists, like, they care about their quarry, the things that they pursue, because you need to have it, not selfishly just so you can target it and harvest it and eat it, but also because you want to see that continue. It's a beautiful thing. Like, we have a great system in place. We don't want either extreme to occur. So I think, it's the hunters and anglers who you can thank for all this biodiversity.
It's like the circle of life. Truly. Gabriella, tell us how we can follow your podcast that you dig into this more, and your work at IWF.
Yes, IWF is iwf.org/CEC. District of Conservation podcast. I also host the Sportswomen Show. We're going to be rebooting that. I've just been so busy, so I haven't been able to record episodes. And townhall.com also is where I opine on these issues. So it's a lot of fun. So, of course, our center, we have focused primarily on energy, like a lot of conservatives do. But when I can tie in the conservation component, I absolutely do. Yes. And it's extremely important. In my most recent op-ed for Earth Day, I talked about how, like, all the, offshore oil and gas, there's a land and water conservation fund that is funded by royalties from offshore oil and gas activity. So $900 million annually goes back to parks, monuments, historical sites, public lands, outdoor recreation sites because of oil and gas. So we want more offshore oil and gas. Not every acre is going to be developed, but the Trump administration has promised more offshore oil and gas because Biden put a moratorium. So you'll see that fund, that conservation fund, permanently funded and supplied because of oil and gas. Nuclear, the most recent Vogtle plant that was constructed or fully online now, it's onboarded, the Unit 3 and Unit 4, took lots of years because of red tape and opposition from environmentalists, but nuclear, it's going to work there and across the country. But nearby that plant in Georgia, they're rehabilitating wetlands. They're trying to promote the gopher tortoise and like all these other songbirds. So like they're very conscious about their surroundings. No nuclear slime is, leaking into these surrounding areas. And then coal miners, a lot of people vilify coal miners. I've personally dealt with them in Virginia where they're hunters. And in Virginia, coal miners have been responsible for helping to bring back the elk to Southwest Virginia.
That's awesome.
So again, when you have prosperity and people employed, and a lot of these people who work in energy are also sportsmen and women too. People don't know that, but there's a lot of overlap between these two interests. So why would they undermine their livelihoods by undermining the environment? They don't. They shouldn't have to choose between either. They can do both. And so I was highlighting that kind of conservation component to the energy industry because, like I said, it is, and we should be arguing, more here, better for the environment, fewer emissions, good for our economy. And again, we becoming a net exporter of energy, giving some of that to our friends abroad, and then having so much supply harnessed here. We don't have to depend on anyone. We don't have to rely on China, Russia, or Iran for energy. And we just become more secure. Security, economic prosperity, and conservation, all three of those can be ensured with domestic energy that we have control over.
Yeah. Critical. Win, win, win. Well, Gabriella, thank you for bringing that down. I love your expertise on this. And I love the fact that you get to dive into it in your work.
It's a lot of fun.
With IWF on these outlets. Before we go, Elise, we have an anniversary that we are celebrating this year. Really, this is like the gift that keeps on giving all year long.
2025 has been a great year for many reasons.
For many reasons.
This year we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice from 2005.
It's like the cherry on top of 2025.
It really
is. The
is.
anniversary of the movie of Pride and Prejudice.
I'll take any excuse to watch this movie. It's truly my favorite rom-com, my favorite story, one of my favorite books of all time. And our editor-in-chief, Kate Trinko, actually wrote a great piece for the Daily Signal on Netflix's new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, its forthcoming adaptation. They cast Emma something is her name, this actress.
Yeah, I'm forgetting too.
And she identifies as non-binary, uses they, them pronouns. And knowing Netflix, it's probably not just going to be like, oh, we cast this actress who's non-binary, but we're going to keep it very traditional to Jane Austen's adaptation. It's probably going to be a little woke. And she wrote a great op-ed on why this totally stands against everything that Jane Austen tries to all the points that she tries to make when she writes, because it's about the immutable differences between men and women and how they complement each other and how
Emma Corrin.
Emma Corrin. Emma Corrin. And yeah, so if you haven't read it yet, please go on the Daily Signal and read that. Yeah, it's a great commentary. And it just makes me really appreciate the 2005 version so much more. Because you don't need to go and remake it for Netflix or even the BBC version with Colin Firth, because, they knew what Jane Austen was trying to come across with, and they really stayed true to it. And it's just, I could go on and on about this movie.
It's such a good movie. Elise and I were just geeking out in my office earlier because the first time I saw this movie, Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 version, I was in 7th grade. And I will never forget it. It was the first time I watched a movie, and I was like, what am I feeling? It was like the flutter, love feelings. It was like, what is this? Like the 7th grader. But it's just such a classic romantic novel. And of course, there are differences in the book. But I think as far as an adaptation, they did a really good job of being true to the book and being true to Jane Austen and what was intended, and captures kind of the essence of this very romantic classic. But Gabriella, I know you have some different opinions.
While it is a universally acclaimed book and film adaptation, a lot of my friends like it. I never really could get into the Jane Austen books or even the film adaptations. I'm more privy to another anniversary and another love story, if we call it that. The Great Gatsby is celebrating a century of being published. 1925 was when it was published. I'm a big F. Scott Fitzgerald fan. I think Gatsby was a greatly misunderstood character. And of course, it's a story of like unrequited love.
Yeah.
And how he was pining for Daisy and she was
a much steamier romance than
yes,
Pride and Prejudice.
yes, it is. It's a little more sultry, but I like the themes. You know, he's this like self-made guy, and even with all that money in the world that he has, being self-made, he couldn't land the girl of his dreams, which is so sad. And that's a theme sometimes in America and in American literature. But for some reason, I don't know, I gravitated more to that than I do Jane Austen. I just can't get to the characters. Maybe it's the time period. I'm not too fine. I don't know. Like, I love English dramas. Maybe like some others, like anything like autobiographical about the Queen or other, you know, figures like that, more contemporary than Jane Austen. But I just couldn't get around to it. Like some of my friends did. And I know my women card is probably being called into question. But there are other like rom-coms and romantic books that I like, maybe of a different style. But I would say that the Gatsby story, a lot of people had like debated the merits of it and said, well, it's not really a love story. And I was telling you before we went on the air when the 2013 film adaptation came out, and I liked that one. It was a little, you know, kind of unconventional. I actually ran into Baz Luhrmann when I was in New York City in 2013, around the time they were promoting the movie. Nicest guy around. Like I was entering the public library, New York Public Library. There were tulips, you know, blooming, and it was such a beautiful day. I was there for a work event at the time when I worked for Leadership Institute. He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He was talking to our group, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Baz Luhrmann." I was like, "Whoa, this is so cool."
Casual.
No, he was such a nice guy, and I actually liked it, even though they were using contemporary music for that time period, the 1920s. So I know there was some effect with it, like they were trying to achieve. I wouldn't have personally used that. I would have used probably more, you know, 1920s flapper style music of the time period. But I thought the acting and the, you know, kind of themes that it was articulating did largely like stay with the book. And F. Scott Fitzgerald, he wrote another great book, Benjamin Button, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is excellent. The film adaptation with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, it's supposed to actually be in Baltimore. The book is based in Baltimore. And I thought they brought that short story to life more, centering it in New Orleans. And again, another love story, but like he's aging backwards. And so like, I like that kind of, it's not like superficial, supernatural, but like he tapped into something like, for me, that's just kind of how I am at. Like, to each their own. You know, we conservatives believe in choice. You know, different type of choices. You can choose. I mean, maybe if I get to read it when I'm older, get married, have kids, and I have kids, and they ask like, "Who's Jane Austen?" I like this book, and I'll have to like get up to speed about it, or try to read it again because yes, it may be brought back. It might be, you know, cool again. But you know, everyone has a different style.
Always been cool, Gabriella.
But I will agree with you, despite that contrarian take, with this idea of reinventing things to deviate from what the author or what the film, you know, mirroring what the author does, because it takes away from the art and the book. Like, why would you do that? And then I just have held this view, why make remakes? Like, print something new. There's so many books that are published annually, autobiographical stuff, or someone's historical narrative, like a hidden story. I was reading today, it's so sad. You know, that the Holocaust survivors, about 75% of them will die within the next 10 years. There's so many stories from that horrible time in history, survivors of Russian, Soviet gulags, like stories like that, which are sad, of course, and depressing, but those stories are worth telling. Like there's another great book, not romantic, but he just passed away within the last year. He was the president's tailor. His name was Martin Greenfield. And he used to make suits, and he survived Auschwitz and all these death camps. He fled soon-to-be communist Czech Republic, came to the United States, built from the ground up. They've made a documentary about him, but they've not made like a feature full-length movie. And there are lots of female protagonists too, like hidden history or autobiographical stories. I want that rather than these kind of botched remakes of classic stuff. Like if you're going to do a retake of a classic, keep it to the original form. Or pick a new story and don't make it wokeified or, deviating from its original intent.
Exactly. You know, I'm not sure how true this is because I didn't click on the article when I saw the headline. I just thought it was funny. But I read somewhere that Disney is halting productions of live action remakes following just the disaster of the Snow White movie.
I saw that too.
We've been praying for
Good on
times like
them.
this.
They finally got
Money
the
talks.
message.
The shareholders
Money
are
talks.
speaking.
Exactly.
Yep. Love it. That's the lesson from today's show. Money talks. Oh, Gabriella, thank you. This was a joy to have you on today. Thank you for
A lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity. Let's do it again soon.
Let's do it again soon.